Welcome again. We are 7 history. We are doing on the Roman history. This afternoon, we are on Vindolanda, a treasure trove of the Roman history. We're just finishing some of the topics in the Roman history. We want to look at one place known as Vindolanda. Vindolanda was a fort during the Roman times in Britain at that particular time. And it was in this place that we have a store. We talk about a trove. A trove is a store where we have got the artifacts. We remember artifacts are the instruments, the weapons, all the materials left by the early man. And therefore, Vindolanda is a treasure trove, quite a number, exciting artifacts, the remains, the implements used by the Romans found in this particular place in Britain. And historians will use Vindolanda to perhaps know more about the lives of the Romans, especially in England or Britain, if you like it, at this particular time. Very interesting material facts have been got at Vindolanda. In Vindolanda, it is the first site in Britain that we have the first written accounts of the Roman soldiers. We remember the legions, who are the Roman soldiers at that particular time. This is where we have the evidence of the first written materials. We now know that the Romans were literate using Vindolanda at this particular time. And Vindolanda, the United Nations Education Scientific Organization, UNESCO, has given it a World Heritage Site. People visit it. The big museum has been constructed at Vindolanda. People will come to see how the Romans, especially, lived in England and influenced the lives there. In Vindolanda, also, we have very interesting communication between the Roman soldiers and back at home. We look at the soldiers writing back to their wives, writing back to their relatives, back in Rome at that particular time. Also, very interesting facts in Vindolanda at that particular time. Vindolanda, also, we are able to see the diet. We have quite a number of materials showing us how the Roman soldiers particularly lived and ate at that particular time. So Vindolanda, very important in trying to reconstruct history. History, remember, you can use the artifacts. We remember we said the archaeologists would excavate, remove the remains of man and be able to see how the Romans lived at that particular time. In Vindolanda, we also see the cultural lives of the Romans, what they did, and their patterns of life at that particular time. So it is one of the most interesting places when we're looking at the Romans, just as we want perhaps to look at their influence in England and what they left in England. And therefore, their presence in England will be particularly felt, especially if you look at Vindolanda. And we're talking about a store. A store has a lot of things you keep there. And therefore, those fragments, those artifacts, those material remains, if you are talking about the Romans in England at that particular time, you will be particularly looking at Vindolanda, which is one of the most strategic places a historian or an archaeologist will look at and reconstruct the Roman history at that particular time. Vindolanda also comes up in history because being a fort, it is where the Roman soldiers stayed at that particular time, and you'll get perhaps the clothes they used. You're able also to look at the weapons the Romans used at that particular time. And therefore, Vindolanda features greatly at that particular time. This was a place just south of the Hadrian Wall. We remember the Hadrian Wall. We talked about Julius Caesar building the wall, separating the Romans from the barbarians. The Romans will look at other people being uncivilized, being uncultured, and therefore Julius Caesar, one of the greatest emperors of the Roman kingdom or empire, had built the Hadrian Wall, and therefore, if you cite Vindolanda, you will be looking at it as being south of the Hadrian Wall at that particular time, and also just playing a significant role. And it's one of the legacies we remember. We will be talking about a legacy. A legacy is something permanent that remains after somebody has gone. And when we talk about the legacies left to us by the Romans, we will be perhaps citing Vindolanda as one of the physical sites where you go at this particular time and you are able to feel the presence of the Romans in England and what they did in England at that particular time, and their style of life, and how they spread their civilization in England at that particular time. So, Trove, you remember, we said was a store, and this is the richest place in material facts to show how the Romans particularly lived, stayed, and influenced the life of people in Great Britain at that particular time. Vindolanda futures greatly, and up to this moment, you will be able to quite uh, get a lot of facts about the Romans. So, as we perhaps finish on the Vindolanda story, we just want to say that more of the videos on the Roman history are going to feature, perhaps as we move away and look at the permanent things left to us by the Romans in the next lesson. I want most of you to be able to subscribe to this channel and be able to comment. So as we proceed with the Roman history, we'll be able perhaps to understand more and to be able to see, especially the influence of the Romans in Great Britain. I just want to thank you, those of you that tuned in this evening, to be able to get together in this history of the Romans, and especially Vindolanda, the fort that is quite rich with the Roman history. Thank you. We meet again in the next class as we look at the Romans gone but not yet forgotten, perhaps the legacy and overall view of the Romans' influence in England, and the Romans' influence all over the world, the things they left us permanently. But Vindolanda stands out. It's a landmark. It's a milestone if you want to know more about the presence of the Romans in England. Vindolanda surely will be a place to visit, and exactly right. It is now a great tourist attraction. People who go to England never miss to visit Vindolanda to be able to reconstruct the Roman history. Wish you the best as we continue on this series on the Roman times and living in the Roman time, especially in England. Thank you, and we meet again in the next lesson.